Hi everyone, my name is Serena Fu. I'm a second year PhD student, part of the Theron group and the Molecular Rheumatology Labs. I'm also the research officer for the Graduate Students Union, so if you have any issues relating to your PhD or your master's research, please do reach out. Today, I'll be talking about science communication and how you can use this to benefit your PhD. Hopefully you'll find some of this information useful. From Instagram to podcasts, we're lucky to be living in a digitally savvy world where information can be disseminated almost immediately. Most of us use social media to connect with family and friends from all over the world, and thus we mainly use it for personal interactions. However, we can leverage these platforms to share our research as well as help our career. I'll be chatting about some of the platforms and how you can use them to benefit your PhD. Twitter is a great way to show your achievements, get advice from a wider PhD community, and find out what kind of events are happening. There are also plenty of postdoc job openings and PhD vacancies if you're thinking about taking these journeys. If you're going to use Twitter professionally, make sure your bio includes exactly what your PhD project is about. One of the great things about Twitter is that it's really interactive. Here are some of the academic groups or people that I follow, which you could be interested in. Instagram is one of the lesser used platforms for academic purposes, but is still incredibly valuable. If your data consists of vibrant images and results, why not have them on an Instagram profile to showcase them? But understandably, everyone needs time away from their actual experiments. Myself and a friend Shakya recently started an Instagram profile called the Teasearchers, where we chat mainly about life as a PhD student and things we found helpful during our postgrad. We have Wellbeing Wednesdays where we post tips about taking care of your mental health, Science Sundays, and a new IGTV series called PhD Feature. In this feature, we ask PhD students to break down their research in 3 minutes. Here's a video from our friend Laura, who is in astrophysics.
Hi, I'm Laura Murphy and I'm a PhD student in astrophysics in Trinity College Dublin. So I'm in my final year of a 4-year PhD, which is funded by the Irish Research Council. And before I go on, if you have any questions about funding or how to get a PhD or just general questions about a PhD, then feel free to message me about that. But this video is going to be about my research. So I'm part of the Stellar Evolution and Supernovae group in Trinity, which is led by Professor Jose Gross. So what that means is that our group looks at the lives and deaths of massive stars, where massive stars are any stars that are more than 10 times the size of the sun, so big stars. And stars of this mass range are important because they typically end their lives as big explosions known as supernovae. Now, what my work focuses on is the evolution of the first stars in the universe. Now, the first stars in the universe are important because they tell us about the history of the universe. And this is a particularly exciting area of research at the moment. I know a lot of people say that about their work, but this is particularly topical at the moment because soon we're going to have the launch of the James Webb Space Telescope. Now, you're going to be hearing a lot about that telescope over the next few years because it's going to be able to look further into space than ever before and is predicted to give us the first ever observations of the first stars. But if we're going to understand those observations, then we need to have up-to-date, reliable theoretical models to do so. So that's where we come in because we do stellar evolution modeling of the first stars. So essentially computer simulations of how these stars change from when they formed until when they died. Now, how we do that is essentially by making fake stars on a computer, and we test how the different initial conditions that we choose would change how that star evolves throughout its lifetime. And how we track that evolution is through the nuclear reactions. So the nuclear reactions in a star is what powers the star, it's what makes it shine. So if we can track its evolution by looking at how those nuclear reactions change the structure of the star and change different properties like how much of a certain element is in the star or how hot it is or how bright it is. So this is what allows us to watch these stars evolve. And so with these stellar evolution models, we'll be able to match those to these future observations and then trace back in time to understand more about how the first stars would have evolved and to constrain the properties of the first stars. So that's all I have time to explain in this video, but feel free to send me a message if you want to hear more about it. And thanks for watching. Bye.
YouTube is also another great outlet for science communication. This one takes a bit more time and in most cases a bit of financial investment as well for the video editing software. The Teasearchers' first video talks about mine and Shaka's different PhD journeys. She took the academic beeline and I took the scenic route. So for any master's students who's thinking about doing a PhD, this video might help you. I have to say though, for the 14-minute long video in the end, it took me about 12 hours to edit, but it was so fun to do and to edit as well. And of course, we learned how to use the video editing software Adobe Premiere Pro. As a side note, I turned to Dr. Amina Yonas's YouTube channel for my own PhD related questions. She gives plenty of advice on different topics such as breaking down literature reviews, writing your dissertation, and which referencing apps to use. These are some examples of how I stayed creative. I'm able to take a productive break from my actual experiments, but it's still in line with my career goals. In the end, I want to have a research-based career that's heavily focused in science communication. If this is something you have in mind too, I definitely recommend you starting a social media profiles on your PhD experiences or your research. And now to bring back science communication to my research. The FIORM group looks at the underlying mechanisms of different types of inflammatory arthritis, and our work is entirely patient-focused. When conducting lab-based research, and when you're doing a PhD with all the different challenges, especially doing a PhD during a pandemic, it's easy to forget that patients are vital for our research. 2 weeks ago, we held a patient symposium where we showed the results of our survey. This survey wanted to highlight the patient's knowledge of their disease, the impact of research in the patient's inflammatory arthritis, and how patients can get more involved. We also had speakers in 3 different areas of expertise: sleep, diet, and exercise, as these are topics patients often ask about during treatment. Patient engagement is really important as we can show them what we've been up to and also take on their suggestions and feedback. Here's a snippet of the presentation and the survey results, and it's great to see that this survey had 1,468 respondents. 1% of patients suffer from inflammatory arthritis, and while we don't know the exact cause, we know that it's a mixture of both genetic and environmental factors. The treatment of this disease has revolutionized over the last 20 years. In the early 2000s, with the introduction of DMARDs and oral molecules, these were positively correlated with improved standard of living for many patients. Now, there are many different forms of medication available that target proteins, cells, and pro-inflammatory signaling pathways in arthritis. However, we know each patient is different, and every patient will respond differently to the medication. This emphasizes the unmet need in our current treatment strategy. As mentioned before, patients respond differently to treatments. Some don't respond at all, and some have a suboptimal response. Achieving remission is actually quite low, with only 25% of patients reaching remission. Additionally, the cost of treatment is high. While there have been many improvements, there is still a long way to go. The aim of this research was to learn about how much do patients know about the medications that they're taking and how many of them are involved in research. We believe that a strong patient partnership is required in order to have the best treatment strategy. To carry out the survey, first we did a literature review to gauge the questions we would ask in the survey. After this, there was an open discussion between clinicians, patients, and scientists that led to the development of 27 questions, which covered 5 different areas: diagnostic tests, medication, adherence to medication, pregnancy, and involvement in research. 85% of the respondents were female, and most of the answers to the questions were a simple yes or no. However, we also used a scaling system of 1 to 10 to really gauge the understanding patients have of their disease. 1 to 3 meaning no understanding, 4 to 6 meaning little understanding, and 7 to 10 meaning a high level of understanding. Now I'm going to show you some of the answers to the questions of the survey. First, we assess the patient's understanding of their disease. We ask them if they knew what CRP or ESR were. These are both inflammatory markers detected in the blood. If elevated, it means that there's a presence of inflammation. And what we saw was that more than half of the respondents, as shown in blue, did not know what CRP or ESR were. Next, we asked patients if they understood what these two antibodies were. These antibodies in question are rheumatoid factor and ACPA. 28% of the respondents said they did not know what rheumatoid factor was, while 77% of the respondents said they did not know what ACPA was. This is really important because ACPA helps us diagnose what kind of arthritis they have. If they're positive for ACPA, it's likely that they have rheumatoid arthritis, while if they're negative for ACPA, it's likely that they have spondyloarthropathy, such as psoriatic arthritis. Next, we asked about the patient's understanding of their medication. Reassuringly, 73% of the patients, as shown in green, understand how their medication works and the possible side effects. We then asked how well patients stick to taking their medication, and we can see that 87% of patients always take their medication as prescribed. Of the 13% who said no, we then asked them if their disease flares up, and 70% of them said yes. This is very important because we now know that if the patient's disease flares up, it's actually very difficult to control the disease. A high percentage of patients are in their childbearing years. Thus, it's important to address the issue of pregnancy in this cohort. When asked if patients were concerned about arthritis and pregnancy, a vast majority said no. However, when asked if medications were safe to take during pregnancy, 91% said no or that they didn't know. This is really important and highlights another unmet need. If a patient was thinking about getting pregnant, it's important that they discuss this with their clinician. Finally, we asked about a patient's involvement in research. Unfortunately, a high number of patients never participated in a research study. Of those who have taken part, most were involved in a survey, while others donated blood, were involved in clinical trials, or donated tissue or joint biopsies. Overall, we found that we really need to improve communication between clinicians and patients, particularly around diagnostic tests, side effects of medication, and pregnancy. Additionally, we want to increase patient involvement through surveys, donations, and at the initial design of research studies. I'd like to end this talk by sharing a little bit about my own project. I work on arthritis in children with Down syndrome, which is a really aggressive form of pediatric arthritis. This image shows the cells that I work with the most, fibroblasts. These are the longer cells in the back. Fibroblast drives disease progression in Down syndrome arthritis. Here, I'm trying to figure out how invasive these fibroblasts are by seeing how well they recruit immune cells, which are the smaller circular cells on top. The more immune cells there are, the more successful the fibroblasts are in attracting and infiltrating immune cells to the site of inflammation, which leads to further swelling and pain. Science communication is crucial for researchers, and social media is a way forward for sharing our research. However, everyone should be aware of what they post, as posts can be deleted, but they will be seen. Also, be wary of online abuse, which unfortunately is too common now. Make sure you read up on how to deal with online trolls or harsh comments. The internet makes it really easy for people to voice their opinions, whether negative or positive, as there is a sense of anonymity. I want to thank my supervisor, Professor Ursula Fearon, and the Molecular Rheumatology Group. I also want to thank our sponsors, National Children's Research Centre and Arthritis Ireland, as well as Jacques, who is the other half of the Teasearchers. I can't talk about science communication without mentioning Unraveling Science podcast, which was started by Dr. Megan Hanlon, one of our postdocs. So if you haven't already, definitely check it out. If you like the style of presentation, this was actually created by a fellow PhD student, Laura Whelan, who posted about this on her Instagram. My email address is up here as well, so do reach out if you have any questions or if you have any suggestions. I also want to thank the Associate Dean for inviting me here to speak today. And thanks everyone for listening.